We're live. Good evening, excuse me. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joel Whitney. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I work with the team at Brooklyn Public Library that produces arts and culture events. We're called BPL Presents, and I couldn't be more pleased to be co-presenting tonight's talk with our esteemed author, Dalma Llanos Figueroa, with our librarians at the New Lots Library here in Brooklyn. Tonight, we'll have the pleasure of one of our senior librarians, Trinity Watson, leading us and moderating, along with her colleague, Patricia Moore, who will add some questions and take part as well. Before we get started, I just want to let you know you can continue to follow our upcoming calendar of exciting concerts, author talks, film festivals, other festivals, and much more by looking for the BPL Presents handles on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and by checking out our web calendar at bklynlibrary.org/BPL Presents. Now, we're also going to be streaming this, and keep that in mind when you hopefully will ask a question. We'll ask you to do that in the chat when you have your chance to speak to our author and ask her question. Tonight's book, A Woman of Endurance, is set in 19th century Puerto Rican plantation society, and it follows Pola, a deeply spiritual African woman who is captured and later sold for the purpose of breeding future slaves. The resulting babies are taken from her as soon as they are born. Pola loses the faith that has guided her and becomes embittered and defensive. The dehumanizing violence of her life almost destroys her. But this is not a novel of defeat, but rather one of survival, regeneration, and reclamation of common humanity. You'll hear a lot more about that, but our guest of honor, I'd like to add, was born in Puerto Rico, Dalma Llanos Figueroa, also raised in New York City. She is a product of the Puerto Rican communities on the island and in the South Bronx. As a child, she was sent to live with her grandparents in Puerto Rico, where she was introduced to the culture of rural Puerto Rico, including the storytelling that came naturally to the women in her family, especially the older women. Much of her work is based on her experiences during this time. Llanos Figueroa taught creative writing, language, and literature in the New York City school system before becoming a young adult librarian and writer. Kudos. And the hardcover edition of Daughters of the Stone, previous book, was shortlisted as a 2010 finalist for the PEN Robert W. Bingham Prize. And this is her second novel, A Woman of Endurance. It was released in April 2022, along with the Spanish edition Indomita, released in May 2022. Her short stories have been published in anthologies and literary magazines such as Breaking Ground, Anthology of Puerto Rican Women Writers in New York City, 1980 to 2012, Growing Up Girl, Afro-Hispanic Review Pleiades, Latino Book Review, Label Me Latina Latino, and Quelle Journal. She lives in New York City, and it couldn't please me more to welcome her along with our great adult librarian, Trinity Watson, to whom I'll hand it over now.
Thank you so much, Joel. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to Joel Whitney and also to my colleague, Patricia Moore, who are also my co-hosts. It is my pleasure and honor to be able to interview Ms. Dalma Llanos Figueroa this evening to discuss her novel, her recently released novel, as Joel just mentioned, in April of this year, A Woman of Endurance. Thank you so much, Ms. Llanos Figueroa, for being here with us this evening. It's an honor to be able to interview you. I absolutely adored your book, so it's my pleasure to be able to speak with you this evening on this further. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over the virtual microphone to you now so that you can go ahead and read an excerpt from A Woman of Endurance. Again, thank you for being here.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you to Brooklyn Public Library for inviting me. I'm up here in the Bronx, so this is an easy way for me to visit you. And I'm glad to reach out to my readers in Brooklyn. So I just wanted to say one word or two about A Woman of Endurance. It is the second in a series of novels. The first one was Daughters of the Stone. The books stand alone. You don't have to have read the first one to enjoy the second, but I just wanted to give you a little background on it. Tonight, I'm going to read the very opening, a short piece from the very opening of the book, and then we can talk. Need a little help here. Okay. Chapter 1, Hacienda Paraíso, Piñones, Puerto Rico, November 1849. Pola, the woman once called Kira, waits until she cannot wait any longer. Her eyes rake the clearing. The other women in the cabin snore, lying motionless after a 16-hour day in the heat and the sun. Across the yard, the men's cabin is dark and still. The squeak of the hammock ties died down long ago. The overseer of Hacienda Paraíso, a man of habit, has put away his whips for the night and sleeps off his latest raid on the women's quarters. La Familia, well fed and comfortable, is lulled to sleep by the sound of the coquis. The smell of the patron's last cigar has long ago dissipated. With a flick of her hand, the patrona, groomed and prepared for bed, has dismissed her house slave. Now she's probably burrowing into her pillow, abandoning herself to her rest. Pola, standing absolutely motionless in the darkness, can almost see them tossing in their bedroom finery, content in their white people dreams. Snores float out of open windows all over the plantation. Lanterns sit cold. Clouds hang low in the sky, blocking out starlight and reflections. Pola looks around the batey. Her eyes search out every shadow, every movement in the backyard. Chickens sit silently, safe in their coops. The stables are still. The occasional snort from the pigsty soon dies down. The herbs she had sprinkled in their food keep the dogs drowsy and disoriented. The night has settled into its rhythm. This time she will make it all the way. This time she will not be back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mrs. Dalma, for that beautiful excerpt from your book, A Woman of Endurance. First off, I'd like to say that I absolutely love the book. The prose was beautifully written, and Polita's story captivated me from page 1 to the last page. So I really enjoyed the novel.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Thank you for sharing it with the world, right? This is a story about an unrepresented, marginalized story about Puerto Rican history, about the African slave trade in Puerto Rico, which is a storyline that many readers, as well as myself, can relate to that. We've never read anything like that before. So it was a different side of history. Same slave narrative, but from a different part of the world. So that was interesting. I wanted to talk about the cover of your book, which is very interesting. For many may know, but others may not. The picture that's framed and mounted against the wall is a well-known Civil War portrait known as the Scourged Back. It was painted in 1863. It's a portrait of an enslaved man, an escaped slave, whose back is being shown during a medical examination. And it's a famed portrait, again, from the latter 19th century. What I found interesting is that the woman on the cover has similar scarring also on the back, and facing the painting as though she's looking into a mirror, so to speak. Besides this being befitting for a slave narrative, can you talk about the decision to use this cover for the book? Why was this painting specifically selected for the cover of your book?
That is a very good question. A lot of people ask about the cover. Most people think it's beautiful. I certainly do. I think there are many reasons why this cover called to me. One reason for me is that in addition to its meaning in the novel, which reflects Paula, my main character, for me, it's a visual manifestation of the fact that no matter how much time passes, no matter how much we may progress in terms of monetary and material possessions, those scars are still there. Those emotional scars do not go away. And until this society deals with what happened in the past, those scars are going to fester. And so the woman in the picture is a Black woman with braided hair, but she's very stylish, and she has a beautiful gown and jewelry and all of that. And most people think, well, she's got it made. And a lot of people may look at any Black woman today and think she's got it made. But the reality is that there are these underlying scars that have not healed and need to be addressed. And I'm hoping that this novel is one way of addressing it.
Wonderful response. I guess it can be representative as well as it can be representative of the fact that what the beauty we see on the outside, we don't know what people have endured.
Exactly.
Right? What
Exactly.
hardships and adversities they faced. Thank you so much. A quintessential example of both the physical and sexual degradation of slaves faced on the hacienda was the teatro scene, which was extremely interesting to me, where the women were displayed in front of live audiences and forced to engage in brutal, barbaric sex acts as a form of entertainment, something I had never heard of, right? But we know that throughout slavery, torturous, barbaric acts were commonplace on haciendas and plantations, of course. Can you explain how the teatro scene came to fruition for the story?
Absolutely. This is fiction. It is a historical novel because it's based in a very specific time and place, but it is fiction. And what I try to do is fill in the record, because we know that the breeding of women happened in the United States, in different parts of the Caribbean. But we don't hear the woman's voice. Her voice was never allowed to be heard. And therefore, we don't know what the actual experience was. So I wanted to take that to the extreme that I can think of, because there was no reason not to do that. People were barbaric on all levels. So this could be one of them. And in that case, that particular slave owner was a very crude and barbaric man. And so this seemed to me to be something that it was his property. He wanted to display it in front of his friends and show that he was in control. And that's where that scene came from.
Adding on, thank you for that. Adding on to your point just a moment ago too, about how adding on to your point in reference to, I'm sorry, losing the train of thought a little bit here. Adding on to your point a minute ago in reference to what you said about being the property of the enslaver, it's quite befitting for the time period that we were in. I just was curious as to whether or not it was historical fiction or was based on research that you had conducted for the actual novel as well. But it was very interesting how she was used as a form of entertainment, and it was described, it was a very palpable feel, you felt the fear and the trepidation that the slave women felt going there, because so much degradation and violence was heaped on them in the teatro scene. So it was very interesting. Like you said, you gave a voice to the voiceless. So that was very empowering in the story as well. So I appreciated that as a reader. My next question for you would be, from the story, we learned that Paulita's harrowing journey commences from Yoruba land in 1836 to the haciendas of Puerto Rico. Now, Polita has what I felt was an indomitable spirit that derives from her Yoruba belief in the Yemaya, the mother goddess.
Mhm.
How did you bring to life Polita's staunch belief in the mother god?
Um, when I look at the experience of enslavement, I look at a situation where people's bodies were captured, but their spirit and their soul was not. And I thought that traditional African religion was probably one of the greatest ways that enslaved people fought back, because in Puerto Rico, at least, although I'm sure it might have happened in other places. Well, I know it happened in other places as well. What the enslaved people did, what the Yoruba people did was, since they were forced to be Catholic in the sense that they were baptized and forced to go to church, they created a parallel universe for their deities. So Yemaya, for instance, is the goddess of the ocean and fertility and procreation within the Catholic Church, and her colors are blue and white. Within the Catholic Church, the Virgin Mary's colors are blue and white. And so when they went to the church to pray and to do obedience, while it appeared that they were doing that for the Virgin Mary, they were actually celebrating Yemaya. And there's this synchronization, and you can go right down the line of all the African deities and their parallels within the Catholic Church. And so that was an important research for me to do. It's not an unknown fact. It is still present today, though not shared, because especially during the 19th century, there was such a brutal and legal prohibition of practicing African religions, even to the point of forbidding the playing of the drum, which was considered integral to the religion. So from that time on, people kept it under wraps because they could be punished for it. So it is more apparent today, but still many families just keep that behind closed doors to avoid problems.
Her husband as well, moving more towards the end of the novel, he also holds on. This book is also about culture and tradition, hanging on to culture and tradition very staunchly, which I appreciated as well. Like, even though they were trying to tear them down and break them down, that indomitable spirit, woman of endurance that she was, she couldn't be torn down. I admired that so much about the character, but also her husband as well. He was a very learned man too.
You mean Simon?
He was, right.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Spoke multiple languages, highly educated, and he audaciously told the slave owner that as well. Towards the end of the novel. So I admired that, even when they, I don't want to give away too much, but when they consummated, got married, her husband and herself, even though the slave owner, the master, and his mistress gave their Christian blessings for the marriage, they did away with that, dispensed with that, and still held on to tradition from the beginning to end. So I appreciate that.
One of the things I wanted to do was look, many of the slave narratives, there's a white society, which is the center, and the slaves are kind of additions or, supplemental people. Many of 19th century literature is that way, American literature. I wanted to turn that on its head. I wanted to make the Black community the center and the white characters peripheral. I wanted to take a look at how did we, not so much they done us wrong, but how did we support each other? How did this community manage to survive and thrive even under those circumstances. And so I wanted to have as diverse and as nuanced and as interesting and varied a community of Black people as there are white people in our literature. And we know that people were captured from all over Africa, and they were purposely separated by language so that they couldn't communicate. So, you know, the captors didn't know who they were roping in, and they didn't realize that Simon was a scholar. He was traveling with his wife on a trip to a university. So, and I also didn't want to make it where all the Black people were wonderful and all the white people were horrible. Our society, my Black society in this book has everything in it. It has scholars, but it also has collaborators. It has people who are very strong and warrior-like, but it has people who have already accepted self-hatred. It has women and men and children and curanderas, healers, who use nature to supply her community with the kind of medical attention that they weren't getting from their owners. So I wanted to make it as for want of a better word, multicultural within the Black community. These people came from everywhere, had all kinds of talents. The women who were wonderful with needles and needlework were very specialized. Even Simon was a weaver of fiber, which later on he becomes a maker of rope, which was so important in the 19th century. You could not run a ship without rope. You could not run a port without rope. So he becomes vital. And these people knew their value. They knew that they were needed. And so he could stand up man to man to the owner of the plantation and say, I know you need me, you know? So I wanted to give them the dignity and the humanity that is usually offered to white characters and not Black.
And you did a beautiful job at doing so as well. I think one of the characters that I found so intriguing too was Celestina, because I had never read of a albino character in any story, any genre that I've ever read. That was very interesting. And I like how varied the characters, like you're saying, were as well. Some were in needlework, then you have the cuadernera. Hope I said that right. That's
Curandera.
Curandera, thank you.
Yes.
And Josefa,
yes,
like the mother of the plantation. So it was like a varied cast of like in-depth, richly drawn, very memorable characters for me. But again, Celestina stood out as the albino character. But then you had two troublemakers on the hacienda as well. So you had Celestina, and then you had Leticia La Loca.
Yes.
Who had the very commanding, intimidating presence on the plantation. How do you go about developing your characters? Like, I know you talked about you wanted the wide range of characters. These two in specific, Leticia La Loca and Celestina, how did you go about?
Well, Celestina is a Black albino. She has white skin and she has no color in her hair or anything, but she has Black features. But because she has white skin, she feels, I'm whiter than these white people, you know, which of course is going to get her into trouble with that attitude. And then Leticia La Loca is, I wanted a Black woman character who has drank the Kool-Aid, right? Being Black is terrible. I want to be white. So, you know, she'll do anything to get some white makeup to put on, and you know, and she'll cut off a horse's tail to have straight hair. So I tried in each case, okay, what is the extreme of this? Not just someone who's passing or wants to pass, but someone who has so much self-hatred that she will go to an extreme. And that's where a lot of these characters came from. But I have to say, I have to give all props to the ancestors, because a lot of the stuff that I wrote, a lot of my characters, let me put this in nice terms, a lot of my characters came in my sleep, came in my meditation. I meditate every day. When I get stuck, I just say, please, this character, Simon, well, Simon showed up and told me, so I didn't even have to look for him. He just told me, I'm coming, and my name is Simon, and I'm going to speak directly to the reader. You stay out of it, right? But other characters, when I get stuck, I talk to them in my meditation and ask them what they think. And, you know, for some people, they call this, for psychologists, they call it, you know, Jungians, this is the collective cultural memory. You're remembering something and you don't know where it came from. If you talk to very religious Catholic people, they say it's guardian angels who are telling you which way to go. For traditional African, for Yoruba people from Nigeria, they'll say the Orishas are whispering in your ear. I don't care where it comes from. I don't know where it comes from. I call it my creative force. I was born with a certain creative force. And as long as I listen to it, I'm okay. When I try to control it, then I run into problems. And I was an English teacher for 20 years. So I taught kids how to outline. And I would outline back and forth for so many years. When I started writing creatively, I realized that goes out the window. It's not my logical mind that's at work. I get these images, I accept the images, and then my logical mind uses craft. I know how to use language so that I can tell the story. But if it weren't for the ancestors, I don't know if these stories would exist.
That's a beautiful response. I was going to ask you, what does your research process look like? So it's wonderful that you draw on to the spirit of the ancestors to help guide you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So,
you know, if they had not gone through what they went through, we would not be here talking to each other.
you stand on the shoulders of very strong people.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Who endured unthinkable
Mhm.
acts of violence and subjugation. So you're absolutely right. I agree. What character did you connect with the most and why?
Oh my goodness, I connected with so many of them for different reasons. I love to cook, so Pastora was a favorite of mine. Tia Josefa is an elder and carries a lot of wisdom. And as I get older, I hope that some of that has rubbed off on me. All the women, I am a needle crafter. So my mother taught me when I was a little girl how to crochet and how to sew. And so I used all of those treasures that I've been given and I put them into the book. I think I also, to some degree, identify with Paula in that I can be very quiet, but a lot of emotions are you know, roiling within me. And it's under control for most of my life, but be careful when the control is gone, you know? So that part of Paula is very me, being in control of myself, but then when I get really upset about something, I just blow.
What surprised you about the story, about the research part of the story? I know you said, again, you draw on the ancestors to help guide you, but was there anything that surprised you that you didn't think you would have put in the story, but then you said, yes, I'm going to put it, anything you took out, added in?
Yeah, one of the things that surprised me was all these images that I was getting in my meditation. I went and tried to research all of them because I wanted to make sure that this could have happened this way. And they were never wrong. Everything, all the images that I got could have existed. Were there breeding farms in Puerto Rico? I don't have any historical data that says that there were. On the other hand, one of the plantations that I visited went from being primarily male dominated cane workers to primarily women. Now, what are you going to do with 70% women in a sugarcane plantation? Not that they didn't work the sugarcane, but that is really hard labor. So what were these women doing? Why were they there? What were they producing? So a lot of the questions that came up, I tried to answer in my book. And, you know, one of the things that really, I should have known that when I started doing traditional research and looking at documents, those were all documents created by slave owners. And obviously that's going to be one point of view. The other voice is seldom heard. Sometimes heard when Black people went to court to accuse people of mistreatment, but that could also lead to more mistreatment. So you have to read between and under the lines. I'll tell you what really did surprise me. I wrote one scene that was a really strong scene, and I thought I'd done a great job, got up from the computer, said to my husband, I did a great job. And then I started throwing up, and I threw up for 3 days. Ended up in the emergency room. Because for me to write something and you to feel it, I have to go there. And so I had to go to those torture scenes. And it's not something that's easily done. You know, had I been just making it up out of fantasy, maybe, but since this was real and it happened, it was very hard to write.
Well, it is difficult because, again, these things did happen. So I can imagine it was challenging to get through some parts of the story. But you made it look so easy from the story. You made it look easy, but like you said, I know it couldn't have been. Which was going to bring me to my next question. What were some of the challenges you faced? Or what were some of the things that may not have been challenges for you in the story? What were some of the enjoyable parts?
Yes, the brutality part was difficult. I didn't want the book to be just a catalog of one brutality after another, after another, after another. But you can't write a slave narrative and have everything be rosy. You can't write any book and have everything be rosy. So I had to figure out how much of that to use without taking into consideration the feelings of the reader. I have read books where I've had to put them down because they're too strong for me. I didn't want that to happen. So there is a love story. There are many mentoring stories. When you think of it, most Black women were taken away from their mothers upon capture. And so for the rest of their lives, who mothered them, who nurtured them, who nourished them? And so in this book, there are many mothering and nurturing relationships. There are 3 main women, Black women, which is Tia Josefa, as you mentioned, who's the head of the needleworking workshop, Pastora, who's the cook, and Rufina, who's the curandera. They take care of her body, her soul, and her food.
Nourishment.
And so just like we have in Christian religion, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the Trinity, there is also a Trinity in this book that watches over the people. And they see the good and they also see the bad, and they take care of both. There is a sense of, we're going to have justice within this community, even though we can't find justice outside of it.
What advice would you have for aspiring authors?
Read everything you can. I think that now that we have so many writers of color out there, always not enough, but so many. Read what came before you. Even if you think that it has nothing to do with you today, you will find that, like building a house, you can build a stronger house if you have a strong foundation. So find out what happened before and see how it connects to what happens today, and take it into consideration when you're building for what happens tomorrow.
Good advice. How we contextualize what we're dealing with today, we have to go back to the past.
And also the other thing is, read everything, learn from what you love, and learn from what you don't love. I mean, I have read books that I really can't stand. And now I have to sit down and say, okay, what did this author do to turn me off as a reader? And that teaches me as much as reading my lady Toni Morrison, or reading Isabel Allende, or reading any of the others that I love, because you need good models and you can learn from bad models too.
Agreed. Agreed. First, you had Daughters of Stone.
Mhm.
So recurring characters such as Elena, we had Mati, and we had a few other characters from Daughters of Stone that also appeared in A Woman of Endurance. And they are standalones, as you mentioned. What are you working on next? What are your other projects that you're currently working on? Can we expect a third novel that also features some of these recurring characters?
I originally envisioned a 4 or 5 book series. The third book is already on its way. I've started writing it. The working title is Of Mothers and Daughters, because the mother-daughter relationship is important throughout my work. And let's just say we haven't seen the last of Paula. And she will continue her journey, and we will find out more about her.
Right, so readers will continue to follow Paulita's journey in the next novel. All right, Of Mothers and Daughters, you said.
Mhm.
All right, that sounds awesome. What do you hope, Mrs. Dalma, your readers will take away from this story?
I think what I said about looking to the past to see how it can strengthen the present and project into the future. I also hope that a lot of people ask me, who are you writing for? I'm writing for everybody, because everybody needs to know what has happened and where we go from here, because none of us are leaving. I mean, we're not going to disappear. We're not getting on a spaceship and going somewhere else. We're here, we're stuck in this together, and how are we going to learn to live with each other? So what I'm hoping is that the book brings up questions that can be discussed, not in an accusatory manner of you people did this and this people did that, but take a look at the characters and understand why they behave the way they do, and why someone may be angry, even though slavery may have ended, 150, 200 years ago. But focus on the text to have a dialogue that we need to have as a society.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now we're going to go over to audience questions to have a further discussion about A Woman of Endurance. Here's a beautiful cover that we were just discussing in the beginning of the interview. So if we can go ahead and start getting out our audience member questions, that would be great. We have a few people joining us from Trinidad. Hi, Michelle.
Oh, wonderful.
Michelle is one of our book club members. If anyone has any questions, just please drop them in the chat.
The artist who did the cover is a Haitian woman.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and you could look her up online. I first found out about her because she was having an exhibit across the hall from where I was doing an event.
Okay.
And she is a paper sculptor. So that dress that you see on the cover is paper. And she made that. And when I saw the dress, I thought, okay, this is my girl.
Beautifully and intricately designed too.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. And the way the style of hairstyle also is
Mm-hmm.
beautiful as well. We have a question for Patricia Moore, my colleague Patricia Moore. How did oral history impact the storyline?
I think oral history is woven into everything I write. The ladies on the porch are still there telling their stories. Mothers, while they're doing their daughter's hair and the daughter is sitting between their knees waiting to have their hair braided, the mother is using that opportunity to tell stories, to give advice, to pass on information. In Daughters of the Stone, it's even more prevalent because that group of ladies sitting on the porch, and they are again in A Woman of Endurance, but in Daughters of the Stone, it's an even stronger. They're like a Shakespearean chorus, making comments on things and having opinions on things. And I wanted to show that even though historically we were not given a voice, those women never stopped talking. My grandmother's friends never stopped talking. They told their stories to people they knew. I'm sure people, grandmas in the South told stories to their children. Before we had television, before we had radio, before we had any of that, we had storytellers and griots in our community. And I wanted to show that. I wanted to honor that tradition. And also, a lot of the stories that I got that I based my book on are based on stories that I was told by elderly women in my environment.
Thank you so much. From Shanika, what made you want to write novels?
I didn't sit down to consciously write a novel. I thought I was going to write memoir. I was going to write the story of my family. I'm so glad I didn't do that, because every time I tried to write an incident that happened, there were like, if there were 4 people there were 20 opinions on what happened and didn't happen. And why didn't you include me? And how come you included her? And I decided, you know what, this is fiction. This is all fiction. I'm making up the whole thing. It has nothing to do with family. And that freed me to embellish and to create characters that weren't there. So, and I found that the story was too big for a short story. There was so much about our cultures that we haven't been able to share, that we need a bigger space to do it.
Okay, we have a comment from Kalinda Reed. I am in the baby stages of reading your book. What I find fascinating is how you integrated the Spanish language. How did you decide when and where to integrate the Spanish language? It's so far, it's beautiful, it's a beautiful, engaging read.
That's a great question. Some people have asked why I included Spanish and asked for a glossary and all of that, and why isn't it all in English? Well, this all happened in Spanish. And I'm inviting you to come into a world that I have created. And so language is part of that world. I worked very hard to give the reader context clues. I don't assume that everybody who's reading this is fluent in Spanish, but I try to give enough context clues so the way that people react to something will tell you the essence of what was just said. I also don't write in Spanish for long, like a whole paragraph. I just put in a word here or there. And also there are some things that can't be translated. Foods and music, that kind of stuff I try to be as authentic as possible without losing my readers.
Any additional questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat now. We have about
You're welcome.
2 minutes remaining. Thank you so much. This is Thelma. While we
You're
wait,
welcome.
I have a question. While we wait, see if we have any more questions for the chat. I have a question. How do you handle literary criticism?
Luckily for me, I think most people who have written about the book are people who like it. There are always, naysayers around. I try to listen. I listen to what people say, and then I weigh the validity of what they're saying and the intent of what they're saying. One lady asked me once, Latinos are so religious people. How come you don't have any religion in your book? And I said, excuse me, there's religion from the very first page, from the very first chapter. And she says, no, I don't mean that. I said, well, that's what I mean. That is religion. The fact that a lot of people don't recognize it as religion because it's Africa-based doesn't mean it's not there. And she says, well, I know Latinos and they're all very Catholic. I said, well, I probably know a few more Latinos than you do. And no, we are not all Catholics. So I've learned to be very discreet. Hold my tongue.
Which can be challenging in this world of blogs and internet and online groups. I'm sure it can be difficult. How was from Elizabeth Hefner? Did your publisher want you to change anything?
My publisher, Amistad, it's a house that welcomes diversity and all cultures of color. So they were pretty much on board with just about everything. There were some suggestions that they made that, for instance, one suggestion that was made, which is an excellent one, was put in the date and location when you change location so that people don't get lost, which is an excellent, because I do go back and forth. And that helps people keep track of where am I and why am I here, right? So that was an excellent suggestion on the part of my editor. Other suggestions, I weighed them and we discussed them and we decided jointly whether or not a change was necessary. I'm open to suggestion, but I also, when I have really strong opinions about certain things, I also make that known. So it was very lucky that we agreed on most things.
From Lynette, how was the translation process for the Spanish edition of your novel?
Oh, that's a that's a great question. HarperCollins is a parent company. Amistad is one part, and HarperCollins Espanol is another part. And my Spanish editor agreed with me that the Spanish translation had to be done by a Puerto Rican who knows the culture really, really well. That was really important to me. When I was a librarian, I bought The Color Purple in Spanish. Nobody read it because that translation was translated into Castilian Spanish. And the whole point of The Color Purple is to be in her voice, right? So it's really important that when you look at a translation, the person who translates knows that culture very, very well. I love the person who translated my book. We talked about it a lot. And she not only does she know the language of Puerto Rico, but she knows the different classes. So for instance, Rufina is an illiterate woman. She knows herbs, she knows nature, she knows curing, but she doesn't know book language, right? She has a very different voice in Spanish than Doña Filo, who is the mistress of the plantation. And they have very different voices than Simon, who is a Muslim and is constantly going, praise be Allah, you know. So the voice has to match the character. And they were very good about that. And may I share that one of the things that I loved about the fact that this book is translated is that, for instance, I know of a situation where A middle-aged woman read the book. She liked it. She bought it in English for her daughter, and she bought it in Spanish for her mother. And now the 3 generations can discuss the book because they each received it in a language that they could understand. So that's really important.
Another question from Kalinda. Do you draw from your family and friend relations while writing?
Yes. Change the names, change the locations, but yes, I do.
From Shanika. Do you find that the Spanish culture is in denial of slavery? How has your community responded to your novels?
Okay, well, there's the Spanish culture, and those are people from Spain. And then there's the Latin American cultures from all the different countries. In terms of the Puerto Rican readers, I have not been on tour in Puerto Rico. I won't go there until November. So I don't know the general reaction to it. But from the people who have read it and have responded to it, it's been very positive in both Amazon and Goodreads, and the reviews that I've read from readers are very positive. And there are people who are deniers of slavery in Puerto Rico, or who don't want to talk about it, or who don't want to get involved in it at all. But I have a feeling those are the people who haven't bought my book anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Last question. Who are some of your favorite authors?
Oh my goodness. Definitely Toni Morrison is at the top. You know, when she said, if there's a book that you want to read and you can't find it, then you must write it. And that's why I started writing. She gave me permission. And she gave me permission to talk about ghosts and family issues and stuff that nobody wanted to talk about. And so here's to my spiritual mom in literature, Toni Morrison. Also Isabel Allende. I love her use of magic realism, which is very important in my book. I love, there's so many. Cristina Garcia, who is a Cuban American writer. Alice Walker. I love, he wrote the Book of Night Women. James, he's a Jamaican writer. His name will come to me in a minute. So I just read Memorial Drive by Natasha Treadaway, who was our poet laureate. And she wrote this wonderful memoir that I have a lot to learn from, because I'm planning on writing a memoir piece also. So I've drawn from the African-American tradition, from the Puerto Rican tradition. Piri Thomas was the first Afro-Puerto Rican writer that I ever read. He wrote about his memoir is about his life in the 1950s in Spanish Harlem. And then there are all the poets. So like I said, I try to read as much as I can. I was trained and educated in a white male European tradition. And so I took all the wealth of that tradition and used it to tell our story. So I do not flush old white men writers down the toilet, because their techniques and their narrative structures gave me a skeleton onto which I could tell our stories.
Wonderful. Just a few things from the chat and then we'll wrap up for the evening.
I'm so glad that they are engaged.
They are engaged, yes. Marlon James is the author.
Marlon James, absolutely. Thank you so much.
The Book of Night Women. Colleen wants you to know muchas gracias. I am so pleased to see you and hear the reasons why you wrote the book. I just borrowed A Woman of Endurance. She will start reading it tonight. Okay. Lois,
Thank you.
Lois Elaine Griffith says, shout out, do you remember Miguel and me at New Eurekan Poets Cafe?
What is the person's name?
Lois Elaine Griffith.
Oh my goodness, at New Eurekan Cafe. That must have been a while ago. Yeah. I've met so many people and I'm getting old, so I don't remember everyone. But if you see me again, please come up to me and remind me.
Lois also says, afirmación, you understand to bring the Spanish into English. Kalinda Reed says, excelente. Thank you for sharing your gift. I agree with Kalinda. Michelle White says she will definitely read this book. My book club has read it as well. And Michelle also wants you to know she's learning Spanish. She's a student of Spanish, myself included.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's really important for me, for all these folks to read it, because, you know, our history is one of dividing us, and I'm all about uniting us. So the more people read it, the better for me. And I appreciate the support.
Well, we appreciate having you here with us this evening. I'd like to take this time to thank our audience, as well as my colleagues, BPL Presents, Joel Whitney and Patricia Moore, for being my co-host this evening. And last but certainly not least, thank you so much, Mrs. Dalma Llanos Figueroa, for joining us this evening as well. Thank you. This has been a pleasure. I had so
Thank
much.
you, Trinity.
Don't be a stranger at BPL, okay? And we
Absolutely. And when the
next
next time I'm in Brooklyn, I will drop by and say hi.
New Lots Library, 665 New Lots. You have a fan here for life. I've got to read Daughters of Stone now.
Okay, you got it.
Mothers and daughters, thank you so much for being here. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening, everyone.
Thanks, all.